Did you hear about the shocking secret pact between Hitler and America? The one they tried to hide for decades? It's been all over social media lately. Headlines screaming about declassified documents that supposedly prove the US cut a deal with the Führer himself. Pretty wild stuff, right? The story spread like wildfire across the internet. Forums lit up with heated debates. Video channels pumped out dramatic exposes. Everyone seemed to be asking the same question. Did America really dodge World War II by making some kind of unholy alliance with Nazi Germany? I mean, just imagine it. The idea that our history books could be hiding such an explosive secret. That everything we thought we knew about one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, might be a lie. It's the kind of claim that makes you sit up and pay attention. The kind that makes you wonder what other earth-shattering revelations might be buried in dusty government archives. What other dark deals might have been struck behind closed doors, far from the public eye? But here's the thing about sensational headlines and viral conspiracy theories. They're often a lot more exciting than the truth. And in this case, the real story is far more nuanced and complex than any secret Hitler pact. So let's dig into those declassified documents everyone's talking about. Let's separate fact from fiction and see what they really reveal about America's relationship with Nazi Germany. Because the truth, as it turns out, is plenty fascinating on its own. No need for exaggeration or sensationalism. Are you ready to uncover the real story behind the headlines? To explore the moral gray areas of history that don't fit neatly into black and white narratives? Then buckle up, because we're about to dive deep into one of the most controversial chapters of World War II. But before we do, ask yourself this. How quick are you to believe dramatic claims about historical events, especially when they promise to reveal some hidden, forbidden knowledge? Would you trust a viral post or video, or would you want to see those declassified documents for yourself? It's a question worth pondering, because in our age of information overload and instant viral sensations, it's more important than ever to approach bold claims with a critical eye, to dig deeper, to question our assumptions, and to always seek out the primary sources. So let's do exactly that. Let's peel back the layers of rumor and speculation and get to the heart of what those declassified files really tell us about America's dealings with Nazi Germany. The truth, as we'll see, is far more complex and morally ambiguous than any simplistic conspiracy theory. It's a story of pragmatic choices made in the aftermath of a devastating war, of scientific knowledge weighed against ethical concerns, of intelligence networks repurposed for a new global conflict. But it's not a story of some grand, secret pact between America and the Third Reich. The documents don't reveal a smoking gun or a hidden alliance. What they do show us, however, is how the lines between allies and enemies can blur in the messy aftermath of global conflict. As we delve into the declassified archives, we'll uncover the true nature of America's post-war relationship with former Nazi personnel. We'll explore Operation Paperclip, which saw German scientists brought to the US to work on everything from rocket technology to chemical weapons. We'll examine how Nazi intelligence networks were tapped to gather information on the new Soviet threat. These are morally complicated decisions, made in a world still reeling from the devastation of World War II and already tensing for the long Cold War ahead. They force us to grapple with difficult questions about the price of national security, the ethics of using knowledge gained through unconscionable means, and the blurry lines between justice and expediency. But isn't that always the way with history? The more closely we examine it, the more we realize that neat, tiny narratives are often just comforting fictions. Reality is messy, full of contradictions and compromises that don't always sit easily with our modern sensibilities. So, as we unpack the real story behind those declassified documents, keep an open mind. Be prepared to wrestle with some uncomfortable truths about the choices made by Allied nations in the wake of World War II. And most importantly, be ready to engage with history in all its nuanced, morally complex glory. Because the tale that emerges from those declassified files isn't one of secret pacts or grand conspiracies. It's a story of human beings making difficult decisions in impossible circumstances, of a world struggling to rebuild itself in the shadow of unprecedented horror, of pragmatism sometimes winning out over idealism in the name of national interest. It's a story that reminds us why it's so crucial to approach history with both critical thinking and empathy, to resist the allure of simple explanations and dramatic revelations, and instead do the hard work of grappling with the full, messy reality of the past. As we dive into the details of America's post-war dealings with former Nazi personnel, we'll encounter figures like Wernher von Braun, the brilliant rocket scientist who went from developing V-2 missiles for Hitler to helping put American astronauts on the moon. We'll explore the ethical tightrope walked by intelligence agencies as they sought to exploit Nazi-built spy networks in Eastern Europe. These stories force us to confront uncomfortable questions. How do we weigh scientific progress against moral compromise? Is it possible to separate valuable knowledge from its tainted origins? And in the high-stakes world of international relations and national security, where do we draw the line between necessary pragmatism and unacceptable collaboration? The declassified documents don't offer easy answers to these questions. What they do provide is a window into the complex decision-making processes of a nation grappling with the aftermath of global war and the dawn of a new geopolitical reality. They reveal an America that was willing to make some ethically questionable choices in the name of maintaining technological and intelligence superiority over the Soviet Union, an America that saw former enemies as potential assets in a new ideological struggle, an America that, like all nations, sometimes prioritized strategic advantage over moral purity. But crucially, these documents do not show evidence of any secret pact with Hitler or the Nazi regime. They don't reveal some grand conspiracy to rewrite the history of World War II. What they offer instead is a more nuanced, and in many ways more challenging, picture of the immediate post-war years. It's a picture that doesn't fit neatly into the black and white narratives we often prefer when thinking about World War II and its aftermath. It asks us to grapple with shades of gray, with the messy realities of international relations and the sometimes ugly compromises made in the name of national security. But again, what emerges isn't some shocking revelation of a secret escape plan or hidden survival. Instead, we see the very human process of sorting through the chaos and uncertainty of the war's aftermath, chasing down leads and trying to separate fact from fiction in a world turned upside down. As we near the end of our journey through these declassified documents, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on what they really tell us about history, about how nations behave in times of crisis, and about the complex legacies of global conflict. These files don't offer us the thrill of uncovering some earth-shattering secret or exposing a massive cover-up. What they do provide is something far more valuable, a deeper, more nuanced understanding of a pivotal moment in world history. They remind us that the past is rarely as simple or straightforward as we might like it to be, that even in conflicts as seemingly clear-cut as World War II, the aftermath can be filled with moral ambiguities and difficult choices. Most importantly, these documents challenge us to think critically about how we engage with history. They ask us to look beyond sensational headlines and viral claims, to dig deeper and grapple with primary sources. To approach the past not as a series of black and white morality tales, but as a complex tapestry of human decisions, with all the flaws and contradictions that entails. So the next time you see a shocking claim about some hidden historical truth, remember this journey we've taken through the real story behind America's post-war dealings with Nazi personnel. Remember the importance of skepticism, of digging deeper, of being willing to engage with the full complexity of the past. Because in the end, isn't that what really matters? Not uncovering some dramatic secret, but developing a richer, more nuanced understanding of history and human nature, of learning to see the shades of gray in a world that often prefers simple narratives of good and evil. As we close this chapter, I leave you with one final question to ponder. How has this exploration changed your perspective on how nations navigate the aftermath of conflict? On the choices made in the name of national security? On the very nature of historical truth itself? These are big questions, without easy answers. But by grappling with them, by being willing to dive into the messy realities of the past, we equip ourselves to better understand the complex world we live in today. And in doing so, we honor the true power of history, not as a source of shocking revelations, but as a teacher of invaluable lessons about human nature, moral complexity, and the never-ending challenge of building a better world. United States secretly forge a pact with Hitler? It's a claim that's been making waves online, supported by whispers of declassified documents and hidden truths. But what's the real story behind these sensational headlines? Today, we're diving deep into the archives, peeling back layers of secrecy and examining the evidence. What we'll uncover isn't a simple tale of good versus evil, but a complex web of post-war politics, scientific ambition, and the blurred lines of morality in a world forever changed by conflict. As we sift through declassified files and redacted memos, we'll encounter Nazi scientists working on American soil, former SS members turned Cold War assets, and even traces of wild rumors about Hitler's escape to South America. But does any of this add up to a secret alliance between Hitler and America? Let's start with the facts. No formal treaty or pact between Hitler and the United States has ever been found in declassified archives. Not a single document supports the idea of a high-level alliance between these sworn enemies. So where did these rumors come from? These weren't clandestine meetings to forge alliances, but rather a calculated move to gain scientific and technological edge during the escalating Cold War. The US was in a race against the Soviet Union, and these German experts held valuable knowledge in fields like rocketry, aviation, and chemical weapons. One of the most famous recruits was Wernher von Braun, the brilliant mind behind the V-2 rocket that terrorized London during the war. Von Braun would go on to become a key figure in NASA's space program, helping to land American astronauts on the moon. But his past association with the Nazi regime raised difficult questions about the price of progress and the ethics of employing those with blood on their hands. So, while there was no secret pact, there was undoubtedly a complex relationship between the US and former Nazi personnel in the post-war years. But what about Hitler himself? Surely if there was a secret alliance, he would have been involved? Declassified memos reveal agents tracking down leads, interviewing witnesses, and even analyzing photos of Hitler lookalikes. But despite years of investigation, no concrete evidence was ever found to support these claims. The official conclusion remained that Hitler had died by suicide in his Berlin bunker in April 1945. Yet the persistence of these rumors speaks to something deeper, a human tendency to seek hidden truths and reject simple explanations. The idea that Hitler might have escaped, perhaps with the help of powerful allies, is in some ways more comforting than accepting that such a monstrous figure could end his life on his own terms. As we examine these declassified documents, we find not evidence of a grand conspiracy, but glimpses into the messy, morally gray world of post-war intelligence gathering. Redacted memos speak of former Nazi officials turned informants, of networks built on shared anti-communist goals rather than ideological alignment. These were not high-level alliances, but pragmatic decisions made in a world rapidly dividing into new spheres of influence. The United States, like other powers, was willing to work with unsavory characters if it meant gaining an advantage in the new global chess game. But why do these rumors of a Hitler-America pact persist, even in the face of evidence to the contrary? Perhaps it's because conspiracy theories offer simple explanations for complex historical events. They provide a clear narrative of good versus evil, of hidden truths waiting to be uncovered. The reality, as we've seen, is far more nuanced. It's a story of compromised ethics, of choosing the lesser evil in pursuit of perceived greater goods. It's about the difficult decisions made in the aftermath of a devastating war, as former enemies became uneasy allies against new threats. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we're left with more questions than answers. How do we reconcile the contributions of Nazi scientists to American technological advancement with the horrors they were complicit in? Where do we draw the line between pragmatism and moral compromise in matters of national security? These are not easy questions to answer, and perhaps that's why conspiracy theories continue to thrive. They offer certainty in a world of ambiguity, a clear villain in a story where the lines between right and wrong are often blurred. But by examining the actual declassified documents, by grappling with the complexities and contradictions they reveal, we can gain a deeper understanding of our past. We can see how decisions made in the heat of conflict and the shadow of new threats shaped the world we live in today. So, as we close this investigation, we're left not with a sensational revelation of a secret Hitler-America pact, but with a more profound appreciation for the intricacies of history. We're reminded that the past is rarely as black and white as we might wish it to be, and that understanding it requires us to confront uncomfortable truths and challenging moral dilemmas. The next time you encounter a headline promising to reveal hidden truths or expose grand conspiracies, remember this journey through the declassified archives. Ask yourself, what's the evidence? What's the context? And most importantly, what does this reveal about our need for simple answers in a complex world? In the end, the real conspiracy might not be hidden in secret documents or redacted files. It might be our own reluctance to face the messy, morally ambiguous reality of history and our present. And that, perhaps, is the most important truth these declassified documents can teach us. Did the United States really forge a secret pact with Hitler? It's a claim that's been making waves online, backed by supposedly declassified documents. But as we dig deeper into the archives, a more nuanced and complex story emerges. One that reveals not a formal alliance, but a web of morally ambiguous decisions made in the aftermath of World War II and the dawn of the Cold War. Let's start by addressing the viral myth head-on. No, there was no secret pact between America and Hitler himself. But the truth behind the declassified files is far more intriguing and troubling. In the chaos following Germany's defeat, the United States saw an opportunity, not to ally with Hitler, but to harness the scientific and intelligence capabilities that Nazi Germany had cultivated. This decision would lead to some of the most controversial programs in American history. Enter Operation Paperclip. As the dust settled on the battlefields of Europe, the US government quietly began recruiting top German scientists and engineers. These weren't just any technicians. Many had been card-carrying members of the Nazi Party. The most famous among them? Wernher von Braun, the brilliant mind behind the V-2 rocket that had rained terror on London. But why would America welcome these former enemies with open arms? The answer lies in the rapidly escalating tensions of the Cold War. The US was desperate to gain any advantage over the Soviet Union, even if it meant turning a blind eye to the past crimes of their new recruits. Von Braun and his colleagues were whisked away to America, their Nazi affiliations conveniently scrubbed from official records. They would go on to play crucial roles in the space race, with von Braun himself becoming the architect of NASA's Saturn V rocket, the very same that would eventually take man to the moon. But Operation Paperclip wasn't the only morally questionable decision made in those tense post-war years. As we delve deeper into the declassified files, we uncover a startling revelation about wartime media cooperation. During the heat of World War II, some U.S. newspaper syndicates found themselves caught in a web of censorship and collaboration. Under strict wartime codes, these media outlets were compelled to cooperate with government directives, sometimes blurring the lines between journalism and propaganda. While the Allies fought fascism abroad, at home, the press faced its own battles with the truth. This cooperation didn't constitute a pact with Hitler, but it does raise uncomfortable questions about the compromises made in the name of national security. How much control should a government have over the flow of information, even in times of war? It's a debate that continues to resonate today. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of America's post-war entanglement with former Nazis comes from the shadowy world of espionage. As the Iron Curtain descended across Europe, the CIA found itself in need of reliable intelligence on Soviet activities. And who better to provide that information than those who had spent years fighting the communists on the Eastern Front? Declassified documents reveal that U.S. intelligence agencies quietly leveraged networks of former Nazis and collaborators to monitor Soviet movements. These weren't official alliances, but rather a series of unofficial, often unsavory arrangements. Former SS officers and Nazi sympathizers were transformed into Cold War assets, their past crimes overlooked in the name of gathering crucial intelligence. This practice extended beyond Europe. In South America, where many high-ranking Nazis had fled after the war, U.S. operatives sometimes turned a blind eye to their presence, or even actively protected them, in exchange for information on communist activities in the region. It's important to note that these weren't ideological alliances. The U.S. government wasn't embracing Nazi ideology, but rather making cold, calculated decisions in what they saw as a new existential struggle against communism. But does that make these choices any less morally questionable? As we piece together this complex historical puzzle, we're forced to confront some uncomfortable truths. The line between ally and enemy, between right and wrong, often becomes blurred in the fog of geopolitics. The decisions made in those early Cold War years continue to cast long shadows over American foreign policy and ethics. So how should we remember this complicated history? It's tempting to paint it in black and white, to see clear heroes and villains, but the reality is far more nuanced. The same country that sacrificed so much to defeat Nazi Germany would later find itself entangled with former Nazis in morally ambiguous ways. This isn't the story of a secret pact or grand conspiracy. It's a tale of pragmatism, of difficult choices made in the face of new threats. It's a reminder that history is rarely as simple as we'd like it to be. As we reflect on these revelations, we're left with a pressing question. Is it ever acceptable to use questionable allies for the sake of greater security? It's a dilemma that has faced nations throughout history and continues to challenge us today. The declassified documents don't provide easy answers. Instead, they invite us to grapple with the complexities of history, to question our assumptions, and to think critically about the choices made by those in power. In the end, perhaps the most valuable lesson we can draw from this chapter of history is the importance of transparency and accountability. It's only through the declassification of these documents that we can begin to understand the full scope of America's post-war entanglements. And it's through open, honest discussions about our past that we can hope to make better decisions in the future. As we close this investigation, we're left with more questions than answers. But that's the nature of true historical inquiry. It challenges us to look beyond simple narratives, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to constantly reassess our understanding of the past. So the next time you hear claims of secret pacts or hidden alliances, remember this story. Remember that the truth is often more complex, more nuanced, and ultimately more fascinating than any conspiracy theory. And always be willing to dig deeper, to question, and to seek out the full story, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.